Alright, so I'm back with part 2 of the World War One, the causes episode. Yes, I have made a costume change. It is the next day, actually. That was late at night. And I went to sleep. So I'm back up now, and we're ready to cover the last of the causes for World War One, as far as the Americans go. For the rest of the world, they're already involved in this war. We talked about the first ones. Remember, Maine versus animals. I like animals because it's more of a U.S. centric kind of acronym. So that's the one we're going to be using. But Maine is just as good, at least for the beginning of the war. Just a quick review. We're taking a look at what caused World War One, the big reasons, the thematic reasons, the ideas, the alliances, especially the secret alliances. Right, with Russia and Serbia, they're allied to Britain and France. Everybody is pledged to protect Belgium, but the Germans don't. So that's going to be problematic. And then the Germans have allied with Austro-Hungarians and the Ottoman Turks. And they technically had an alliance with Italy, but Italy also had an alliance with France, and they're going to break the alliance with Germany and Austria-Hungary and cleave to the Triple Entente, or the Allied side. So we've got those alliances going on, and essentially when things get rolling, think of these alliances as big chains, and you have two groups that are fighting, right, that are about to fight on this big boat. Everybody's chained through these alliances to everybody. So once two start tussling and fighting, and they fall over into the water, which we'll kind of idealize as war, what's going to happen to everybody else? Well, everybody's chained to each other, so everybody's going to fall in the water as well. So that's what's going on here. Imperialism, especially fighting over Africa, is going to be a big thing. Nationalism, the idea that our country is number one, and also the idea that war is glorious. So you are supposed to go off to war as a young person in these countries. That is the way you become a man. Also, the idea that things have been stolen from you, specifically land in the past, and also specifically for Austria-Hungary, this idea of there's a lot of different ethnic groups trying to create their own countries out of your country, Austria-Hungary. All of this is going to come to a head with the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand in 1914. June, July 1914. I'm unsure of the exact date right now. I guess I could go back in a second and look that up, but just to kind of for continuity right now, we're going to move along. The big point here is all of the major powers are at war in World War One by August of 1914. It's called the Guns of August. All right, all those guns are fighting by 1914, except for the United States. We're not involved in World War One in 1914. We don't join with Archduke Franz Ferdinand. Right? It's bad. We don't like it. We don't necessarily like what Austria-Hungary is doing to those ethnic groups either. So we're not going to pick sides, even though we are kind of on the sideline really rooting for the Allied powers. Like, Britain is our number one friend. We want to make sure they succeed, and we're going to be trading a lot of goods with Britain and a lot of war material with Britain. But we're not going to actually fight this war. So why do we stay out of this war? It's pretty simple. All right, take a look at what's going to happen. 9 million people are going to die. We want as few of them to be as Americans as possible. In fact, we want 0 of them to be as Americans. So we want to stay out of the war to protect our citizens, especially if this war does not have a direct impact on our security. Right now, this is a European affair. It's horrible, it's a big old mess, but it's not threatening us. We've got 2 huge oceans protecting us. We got decent relations with, well, not that good relations with Mexico at the time, but we've got a very good relationship with Canada and Britain to the north. So we're not necessarily being invaded here. Other reasons why we're not going to get involved is immigration. The United States has two major immigrant groups that make up a lot of the population of the United States: German Americans and Irish Americans. Irish Americans, at the time, Ireland is kind of struggling for their independence from Great Britain. They're not going to want to help out the British Empire. All right, Irish Americans aren't necessarily going to want to help out the British Empire. German Americans, if we get involved in this war, we're definitely getting involved on the side of the Allied powers, which means they're going to be fighting their distant cousins. They're going to be fighting their people kin to them through blood. So they're not going to want to do that. So there's a very strong anti-war movement in the United States. There are some other ones. Wars aren't necessarily good for the economy, even though the world wars, both of them are going to be very good for the U.S. economy. Mainly because we are removed from the destruction. It's not our factories that are going to be blown up during this war. Right? There are other things that are pulling us into the war. We have major banks. You think of J.P. Morgan. He's floating millions and millions of dollars to the British to fight this war. If they fall, his money goes up in smoke. So there's a big thing with him and other bankers like them trying to push us into war. Another thing is that this war is doing very good for American arms manufacturers. Most of the major weapons of the war are going to be produced or designed by Americans. The Maxim machine gun is an American, but it's going to be, that machine gun is used in both central powered camps and Allied camps. So that's a big thing going on as well. The trade. The neutrality of that trade is going to be big. So let's get into the causes of why the United States is going to get pulled into this. Now, Woodrow Wilson is our president. He has been, and he has been running, he's been campaigning and making sure people know he does not want to be in this war. Like most Americans, we don't want to be involved in this war, as the cat is trying to get in the door. So even in 1916, he's saying that. But before we get to 1916, there is something that is pushing us towards war. The Lusitania is a steamship, a ocean liner, very similar to the Titanic. It's going from England to the United States all the time, carrying mainly passengers. However, secretly, and here goes a big deal about this, secretly we are putting weapons on these ships in the bottom hold down there. We're putting bullets, guns, cannon ammunition, all those things, and we're putting them on these ships and we're sending them to Britain. So it looks like this is a passenger ship that should not be attacked by German undersea boots or U-boats, submarines. However, secretly they're carrying something that they really shouldn't be carrying. The Germans put out a notice saying that they're going to sink any British flagged ship, including steamships carrying passengers. And they're going to do that without any prior notice. So they send out this big message saying, this is your notice. All right. If you travel on these ships, you're taking your life into your own hands. The Lusitania leaves the United States, going back to Britain, off the coast of Ireland. A German U-boat shoots 2 torpedoes into the side. Now this newspaper here basically shows where the 2 torpedoes hit. The Lusitania, let me get my hand right. Since the 2 torpedoes hit this side, it starts filling up water and it's going to turn over on its side before it sinks. Essentially not allowing lifeboats to deploy. Half the lifeboats, or most of the lifeboats, are going to be utterly useless. 120 people on that ship were Americans. So we've got American blood in this war now. It's riling up Americans really badly, but we don't go to war in 1915. It's not until 1917 that we go to war. So the Lusitania, and one of the acronym letters is L for Lusitania. The Lusitania by itself does not cause us to get into World War I. If so, we're entering in 1915. But here's what happens. Cooler heads prevail. Germany is going to sign the Sussex Pledge, which says we will not sink any more passenger ships without prior warning. So we will warn these ships that we're going to, or as the Germans, they're going to say, we're going to warn these ships that we're going to sink so that the people can get off the boats to stop the loss of life. Okay, that's going to make us back off from the edge of war. We're going to say, okay, the Germans are reasonable. We're not going to get involved in this war right now. So we back off of it. Still, American isolationism is winning out. Woodrow Wilson, the leader of the country, does not want to get involved. He's running for re-election in 1916. His major campaign platform is, he kept us out of war. Look at how awesome Woodrow Wilson is. While every single other country in the world, it seemed, was at each other's throat with a knife, he's the one that kept American calm. He's the one that's protected Americans. He's the one that's kept us out of this fray, out of this big entanglement in Europe. Very popular, wins re-election. 1917, we go to war. So why? The big thing is going to be, one, it's not necessarily the Zimmermann Telegraph by itself either. But it's going to be the Zimmermann Telegraph along with a resumption of that U-boat warfare where they're just sinking anything that they see. Right? This U-boat, the submarine, is something new. It's kind of scary because you're rolling along as a passenger ship and all of a sudden, boom, explosion, and you're sinking. And you don't see why. You don't know why. So that's a big thing. It's got people on edge. The other thing that's going to contribute, other than the Germans restarting that U-boat warfare, is the Zimmermann Telegraph. Now, this is an old telegraph. This is something the British have already intercepted. This is a German communication from Germany to Mexico. And essentially what the German Foreign Ministry is trying to get is they're trying to get Mexico to start a war with the United States. This will bring us into World War I, but here's what Germany is hoping. Germany is hoping that the United States, they know we're going to enter the war eventually, but they're hoping they can keep U.S. soldiers out of Europe. If they can convince Mexico to attack the United States, where are our soldiers going to have to go? They're going to have to go to Texas. They're going to have to go to Arizona to protect our borders against Mexico. And if our soldiers are in Texas and in Arizona, New Mexico, California, they're definitely not going to be in France. Meanwhile, Germany can crush the rest of the Allies, take over Paris, sign a peace accord, pay off Mexico to end this war. Right? So Mexico played their part. What they want to give Mexico in return is Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas, and parts of California. What they lost in the Mexican-American War. The British have already uncovered this, but they know if they release it too early, the American public is going to be suspicious of it. So they wait until Germany says that they're going to resume U-boat warfare, unrestricted U-boat warfare. They release it to the American public. We get up in arms because they're sinking our ships, and now they're trying to get our neighbors to fight against us. Boom, we enter the war, 1917, and not a moment too soon, because one of the major powers, right, in the Allied camp, Russia, has just had a revolution and is pulling out of the war. So now Germany, who's been fighting with two hands, fighting a person over here and a person over here, France and Great Britain and Russia on the other side, Russia's gone. Now they can come at Germany and France with both fists. But that's when America shows up on the scene, giving fresh troops and a lot more supplies. And that's essentially it's going to turn the war. Our soldiers are going to fight in two major battles, but it's really the supplies and this idea that we have fresh troops who've not been lingering in those camps for 2.5 years, getting so weak. All right, and that's the end of the causes of World War II, or World War I, World War I.